My colleague Adam and I will be spending today talking a little bit about how to build self-service portals. Last week, we spent a lot of time on how you can build onboarding content and what you think about in those cases. This week, we'll be talking about once you have all of your users onboarded, what do you do with them? A lot of the time, I think we think about onboarding as sort of the beginning and end of the journey. We have our 90-day onboarding plan, all of that. And then once people are in the funnel, we sort of just let them float along, and we want to think about how we can do a better job of that. Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how you can do a good job with your customer success and self-service portals. To get started, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time. I talked about this a little bit in the intro, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about how we do onboarding and how we do ongoing customer support. So in the onboarding process, I think if you're interested, we talked about this a ton last week, there's a pretty regimented process that you often go through with a SaaS company. There's usually goals and metrics around how long it takes you to onboard, and we really drive them towards that with sort of a laser focus and weekly meetings, and or even just if you're doing a self-serve approach with a checklist of things that they should really get done. And then once we move people out of onboarding, I think it becomes a little bit more of a free-for-all because you're trying to get people deeper into the product. And a lot of the time as customer success people, maybe we'll do a QBR or a quarterly business review to see how things are going. But we have less structure around how we treat customers once they're actually customers, which for SaaS companies is a huge question because obviously reducing churn is super important. I think a lot of that is about, announcing important features to them and keeping them excited and getting deeper into the product. But it's also about making it really easy and intuitive for them to find answers on their own. I don't think people want to talk to me every day as much as I would enjoy that. So Adam, I think you actually have a story about how, even if this isn't your area of expertise, how to get started with customer support.
Well, I am not an archaeologist, but I occasionally read Wikipedia, and I came across a funny story about how about 150 years ago, there were these British archaeologists in Mesopotamian region, modern day Iraq, that discovered this tablet that was part of the civilization of Ur, U-R. And they spent a year or so trying to decipher what is Akkadian cuneiform. And they had multiple researchers trying to figure out what was written on this tablet. And lo and behold, it was a customer complaint. And so this particular tablet is known as the oldest complaint in human history. So there was an order of Ur from a merchant, Nasir, who had ordered from someone named Nani. And Nasir received his copper ore and was very frustrated with the quality of it. And so he spent, I don't know, how much time do you think this would have taken Georgia to write? More than a night, to draft this tablet and then send it over to the city of Ur. So I thought this was a funny story. And I imagine that people haven't changed in terms of complaints, but how you respond to complaints has.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been in customer support, at least rest assured that someone hasn't spent the time to carve their complaint into stone for you. So if you think you're having a bad day, probably not as bad as this guy.
That would be a funny thing to do though, as like a modern day complaint.
Everyone had their 2020 hobbies. I got really into stone carving, figured I'd write up my complaints for you. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully we can do slightly better with customer support now so that no one does that for us. I just wanted to run us through really quickly some ideas about why you should do self-serve customer support, even if you're in an enterprise company that talks to your clients all the time and gets these like lovely stone complaints. There's still really great reasons to do customer support. The first of which is that no one wants to talk to other human beings. We were talking about this. I was reading this amazing article from, I think, early 2000. And it was in the Harvard Business Review. It's like this very serious publication. And it's this person pontificating about how no one wants to do self-serve support because just imagine going through an airline portal and having to search for multiple airlines instead of just calling your travel agent. Like, what a nightmare. And of course, now
that would be the default. It was so much easier to call
exactly. Yeah. And I'm like 20 years later, ever call a travel agent. I mean, some people do, that's awesome. But if it's not like a really intense trip that needs tons of detailed planning, I'm 100% going to go onto Kayak or Bing or whatever and find the flights myself. And I think with the internet, we've moved to this world where we really do, as consumers, want to be able to find the answers ourselves. And we don't want to have to,
don't want to get on the phone, right? Super irritating.
Yeah. And I think there's still this sense that getting on the phone means being on hold and dealing with someone who's not quite sure. And, it's just like, it doesn't sound fun, and it's not a way people want to spend time. So they'll actually spend hours trying to figure out the answer themselves to not call you. So making it so that process is as pleasant as possible is really important to your business.
And let's not make it hours. That's part of the goal. We'll make really good customer portals where we'll bring it to minutes, few minutes.
Exactly. It's not a moment of delight if you're spending hours trying to figure out your answer. The other reason that this is really valuable is that people cost money. Anyone who's doing support costs a little bit more. If people can self-serve and find the answers online, it's a lot cheaper for B2C and B2B companies.
Right.
And the last thing I wanted to note when we're thinking about self-serve portals is that, in the same way, I think last week when we were talking about onboarding, we talked a lot about how you want to have sort of a structure to your onboarding. You want to have one primary goal, that aha moment. And the same is actually true of a self-service portal. So where I think the intuition is to give people like every option in the world so that they can find those things, the actual best thing to do is to be pretty prescriptive about how they should go about finding their answers and what are the main things that they should be looking at. People, if they're getting this far in, they've already done some research and they're probably already a little annoyed. So they don't want you to give them they don't want like a Cheesecake Factory menu of options. They just want you to tell them what to do.
A diner menu. Yeah. I grew up outside New York City. We have like diner culture. It makes you a little worried, like, if you make so many things, how good could each thing be? But I was going to actually bring up a point earlier just about like how frustrating it can be going through knowledge bases of sort of like web 1.0 kind of companies. So like I was doing this the other day when I was looking at this topic of low code. We were writing about low code platforms for developers and trying to look at some app companies like Mendix and Appian. I hope those companies are not watching right now. They have these like super outdated portals where it's more of like celebrating themselves than getting to the point and just telling people what it is that they do, right? And the other example I was going to give is I've seen customer portals getting to the point, which is like they'll have a section called Get Started, because I think they're assuming that a lot of people who are coming to the customer portal are people who are first users of the product. And so they curate content for exactly that type of audience.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too. Actually, this is something we talk about a lot here, is that there is a depth versus breadth chart that we often draw about how you get accounts onboarded. And I think we always spend a lot of time on the depth of getting the first user to set everything up and get everything going. But there's actually often a problem, like the reason to have a getting started section on a help page is there's often like second and third and fourth users who are getting no context, or not talking to anybody, aren't going through that getting started checklist, and are coming in kind of blind because their colleague invited them. And if you want to be able to sort of get deep into an account so it doesn't churn as soon as your champion leaves, you really need a lot of people to be interested in what you're doing and know how to use it. And so creating resources for those customers is also part of what is really valuable about a self-serve portal. Cool. Okay, so we've been talking high level about why they're so important, but let's actually talk about what some of the features of a self-serve portal are, how you can make a good one, what we value in them. So Adam, I think this is sort of your section.
Yeah. Here's just sort of like greatest hits, right, of a customer portal. Ideally, you have all of them, but you really can get started with, say, 3 out of the 5 of these. And Georgia, can you get started with the first one? We'll dig into. Before that, I took a great screenshot earlier today. So this is of FreshDesk customer portal. And FreshDesk also builds customer support software, right? So you'd expect them to have a pretty good support portal. And right here, we can actually see all 5 of those points that were just mentioned on the previous slide. So now we're going to navigate through them.
It's nice the way they have it set up. So you can kind of front and center, what you are looking for. They use clear language. And as a user, you can sort of go in and you can choose your own adventure. But again, it's pretty prescriptive about the things that you'll probably want to do when you're in here. And so I think that's a nice way to set it up.
Yeah, I like that call to action, train your new agents, right?
Exactly.
Very persona driven.
I think an academy is not all that different than a knowledge base, but oftentimes it's a little bit more video led. And I think in today's era, video is a great way to, video and GIFs both are a great way to sort of show people how to do things within your UI. I think we know it's great to be able to describe how to do things. And like, I don't always like listening to sound on video. So a lot of the time I'll read an article first. But I think particularly GIFs are just like really short videos under 2 minutes showing people how to do the things they need to do to really get started and be successful. And it also allows people to sort of choose their own adventure. If you're looking to get really deep, you can watch a 30-minute webinar. That can be really valuable for certain people, especially if you break it up by topic area, but also 2-minute videos when people are really just, have a question or trying to get it done can be super helpful in making sure that, they don't spend more than 2 minutes on it, trying to sort of like navigate through your description of your product that you know better than they do. Cool.
Yeah, makes sense.
The community. We actually had a good time putting together. I think Adam has a lot more thoughts on the community. He spent a lot of time putting our community together, but we had this debate internally about whether it made sense for an early stage startup to have a community. Will there be enough interaction? And we've actually found it to be really helpful. We're getting people on there every week, asking questions, sharing knowledge about what they're doing. And it acts as almost like a secondary knowledge base for folks.
Yeah, that's true. And at the end of the day, the benefit of the community is that you're having your customers answer other customers' questions, right?
Yeah.
So it ends up reducing a lot of the load on your customer support team.
And then the FAQ section, I think you should think about this section and actually think about what questions your customers are asking regularly. I think this is one of those places where, like we were talking about before, a lot of the time it's really easy to want to just dump everything into an FAQ section. And that's not, people want prescriptive answers. They want to be able to find the things they want. So actually narrowing it down a little bit and getting really specific about the types of questions people are asking is a really important thing, or even just breaking it out like you see here into sections so people can navigate a little bit more easily.
Yeah. It feels almost stupid to write like, what is FreshDesk? Right. But people will just have that question and you can make it super explicit. You feel like, oh my God, my website did such a good job of explaining FreshDesk, but actually the answer is maybe no. And you just want a snippet answer. So again, like you said, just being super straightforward.
And I think this goes back to our point earlier that like your second and third users have maybe been invited to this platform. They don't know what it is, their manager invited them, their colleague invited them. And so actually, I think there's a balance between trusting your users and knowing that they're intelligent and thoughtful people, and also knowing that, sometimes they don't have a lot of context about your software. And so it's important to sometimes do the really basic questions and make sure that everyone is sort of coming in with the same sort of general assumptions about your software before they get started.
Yeah.
Cool. The last thing I would say about Escalation is that you can build the most perfect self-service portal in the world. Sometimes things will break, sometimes things will go wrong, sometimes people won't be able to find their answers, and you need to give them a way to contact an actual person. So here's what we're thinking about as sort of our gold standard of a customer channel. You have Zapier has this beautiful getting started, some really nice cards that you can go through to figure out how to really get going with their automation tools. They have frequently asked questions, and they have ways to get more support. So Candu is, like I said, a UI builder. We built this entire dashboard ourselves, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. We're just going to jump right into the content section, so the drag and drop editor. We've rebuilt this self-service portal. You'll see we have the getting started, we have the video, we have all of their little cards. Yeah, so you can just rebuild it all in Candu. This didn't take me very long. You just drag the elements over from the left on the editor.
Wow.
And then
it's quite comprehensive, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It wasn't too hard. It's not a pop-up. It doesn't sit on top of your content. It actually moves your content that's already on the page down and around. So it looks like your developer put all this together. But the really cool stuff is that, if I'm Zapier and I like this card and I want to do another row, I can just, duplicate this card really easily and update the content, update the links, and suddenly I'm sending my users to a new place. And I think this is really important in a self-service portal because You're changing your product features all the time. You're changing your UI, you're updating things, and your portal should not be just a static element that lives like in the past, in previous version of your UI. It should be a living, breathing document that changes all the time based on feedback that you get from your clients. We got feedback from our clients that they were getting confused on a step of onboarding, and using Candu, we just added that as a step in their checklist, and it saved a ton of support tickets. And so I think the last thing that I'll note about this self-service portal is that you should be learning all the time from your customers. You should be paying attention to when they need to escalate things and what they're getting confused by. And you should be updating your content constantly to sort of keep those questions top of mind and testing what really helps, improve your support ticket queue. If any of this is interesting or exciting to you, if you're starting to have thoughts percolate about how you want to build your own content, these are not the only UI blocks we can build. This is just today's example. Please reach out. We'd love to spend a little bit more time on it with you. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.